Welcome to the VEROSCOPE analysis today of this guy, Michael Morrissey. Michael Morrissey is the district attorney in the Karen Reid case, and we're going to be analysing the statement that he made in the order that he made it. So let's kick off. If you're new to statement analysis, we analyze pretty much daily a statement for deception and lies, and we use the same style of analysis that the FBI use in their statement analysis. So we're looking at tenses and pronouns and the different ways that people choose their language at the unconscious level, and we see how much we can determine from what they say to what they're actually thinking. So let's listen to Michael Morrissey. His view is if you disagree with him in any way, shape or form, if you're trying to reassign his assignment of guilt to Karen, if you're trying to reassign it to others, then you're extremely dangerous. Let's listen to what he has to say.
This will be the first statement of its kind in my dozen years as Norfolk District Attorney. The harassment of witnesses in the murder prosecution of Karen Reid is absolutely baseless. It should be an outrage to any decent person, and it needs to stop. Innuendo is not evidence. False narratives are not evidence. However, what evidence does show is that John O'Keefe never entered the home at 34 Fairview Road in Canton the night he died. Location data from his phone, recovered from the lawn beneath his body when he was transported to the hospital, shows that this phone did not enter that home.
Okay, let's analyze what he said so far. So we have the opening. This will be the first statement of its kind in my dozen years as the district attorney, he says. Forgive some of the typos and the transcript errors. We'll work with what we've got. So he opens with time, the dozen years, and he opens with self-reference, my, and he opens with his credentials. He does not open with John O'Keefe, the evidence, or the facts of the case. So note, the opening reveals priority. We look for the speaker's priority in analysis. His priority is establishing his own authority before presenting the information. And we note whenever we see that, there does tend to be an evidence gap, because for them, their priority is authority first rather than evidence first. Then we have his second sentence, the first claim. He says the harassment of witnesses in the murder prosecution of Karen Reid is absolutely baseless. This is before the trial, by the way. So I don't know the rules in the US, whether this is considered interfering or tainting the jury pool. But essentially, he's giving his opinion, and he has assigned guilt to Karen Reid already before the trial. But notice there's no I in the statement. He drops the I pronoun. That's quite telling in analysis. Somebody removing themselves psychologically from the statement, we look for the reason why. He begins with the abstract noun, the harassment, and he uses the strongest possible modifier with the word absolutely. Absolutely baseless. So we have a pattern emergent. He's not saying I believe or I have determined. He jumps to third person abstract language immediately after establishing his credentials. Then sentences 3 to 4, we have emotional appeals. He says, it should be an outrage. Notice the word should. So he's not saying that it is an outrage. He has a qualifier there, a minimizer. He's less confident. It should be an outrage to any decent person. So if you don't agree with him, you're not decent. And it needs to stop, he said, as if he's in charge. Innuendo is not evidence. False narratives are not evidence, he says. Okay, so any decent person. Here we have moral judgment from Michael Morrissey. And in effect, an insult to anyone who disagrees with him, because it should be an outrage, but he's not saying that it is an outrage. We have 3 emotional statements before any evidence is given by him, and we have telling the audience what is not evidence as opposed to showing. So we have a pattern building here. We have his credentials, the emotion, and then the negatives. But again, we still have no positive evidence shown. We also have the beginning of a threat pattern. Notice what he's doing. We have the moral threat. It should be an outrage to any decent person, he says. Translation, if you disagree with me, you're not a decent person. Command number 1, he says, it needs to stop. And this is not a request, and it's not an appeal. It's a command from the authority that he believes that he has. This is not evidence presentation. This is attempting to silence scrutiny through 1, moral shaming, indecent, 2, authority commands, needs to stop, and 3, before presenting any evidence. A confident prosecutor presents facts. A defensive one attacks critics. And then he goes on to the phone data claim. He says, however, what evidence does show is that John O'Keefe never entered the home at 34 Fairview. Don't forget, the trial hasn't even started. And he's telling us what the evidence shows. He then goes on to say, at 34 Fairview, in Canton, the night he died. Location data from his phone, and if you know more about the location data, do put it in the comments. Location data from his phone recovered from the lawn beneath his body. It's strange how phones end up underneath bodies. When he was transported to the hospital, shows that this phone did not enter that home. Interesting, isn't it? For those who are studying statement analysis. This phone and that home. So we have the first mention of actual evidence, but it's framed as the negative. Never entered, did not enter. So it's desperate for everybody to keep John out of the house. And he's joining in this quest to keep John O'Keefe out of the murder house. Then we have passive voice. Recovered, he says, and was transported. So we have a lack of agency. In passive voice, the person is missing. By whom? By whom? So we have no one attributed to who analyzed the location data. How reliable is it? So his first evidence is stated as what didn't happen, and the evidence itself lacks to be attributed to any individual. No expert is named, no method is explained. Let's carry on and hear what he has to say next.
11 people have given statements that they did not see John O'Keefe enter the home at 34 Fairview that night. 0 people have said that they saw him enter the home. 0. No one. Some have, without any evidence, pointed to 18-year-old Colin Albert, a nephew of the homeowner, and accused him of attacking John O'Keefe as he entered the home. But phone evidence shows O'Keefe never entered the home at all. Testimony from witnesses tell us that 18-year-old Colin Albert had left his uncle's home before John O'Keefe and Karen Reed had arrived outside the residence. There was no fight inside that home. John O'Keefe did not enter the home. Colin Albert, the young man being vilified, was not present when Reed's vehicle and John O'Keefe arrived on the street. This is a false narrative.
Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? This is a false narrative, and it has to stop. Okay, let's do the analysis of what he said. So he said 11 people have given statements that they did not see John O'Keefe enter the home at 34 Fairview that night. 0 people have said that they saw him enter the home. 0, no one. Okay. So here we have Morrissey give us 3 ways to say 0 in one sentence. So it's sensitive to him. It's very important that they all establish John O'Keefe did not enter that home, because if it is established that he did, the whole narrative falls apart. Why does 0 name 3 different expressions? Or sorry, need 3 different expressions? The repetition suggests this is where he feels most vulnerable, and likely because he has caught the vulnerability from those he's spoken to. Truth doesn't need this much emphasis from a district attorney before the trial has even started. He goes on to mention Colin Albert. I wonder how much all of these people know each other. He's very sensitive. He says some have, without any evidence, pointed to 18-year-old Colin Albert. So he introduces the 18-year-old as important to him. A nephew of the homeowner. Does he know the homeowner? Does this guy know the homeowner? And accused him of attacking John O'Keefe as he entered the home. So some people have accused Colin Albert of attacking John O'Keefe. But phone evidence shows O'Keefe never entered the home at all. Testimony from witnesses tells us that 18-year-old Colin Albert had left his uncle's home before John O'Keefe and Karen Reed had arrived outside the residence. So 18-year-old Colin Albert, he is emphasizing youth. He's trying to convince us. He's not conveying information as such. He's using convincing language. He's in effect trying to try the case himself before it's even started, as the judge and the jury. A nephew. So a nephew of the homeowner. He minimizes his own personal connection to Colin Albert, if he has one. Without any evidence, he says, it's a preemptive dismissal, and had left before they had arrived. So this is interesting. We like to pay attention when we see tense changes. So here we have the past perfect. Had left before they had arrived. So he's saying Colin Albert had left before they had arrived. So that would require people telling the District Attorney Michael Morrissey what time Colin Albert left and what time John O'Keefe arrived. So we have, through the use of the past perfect tense, time is now more important to us as analysts, and we need to know who knows these times of had left and had arrived, and how did they know? Who knew and how did they know? When did Colin leave? We know on his timeline everyone's trying to buy him 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. How long before they arrived? Who saw him leave? What time did Karen and John arrive? So the simple past is natural memory. Colin left before they arrived. With Morrissey using the past perfect, Colin had left before they had arrived. So he provides the sequence, but not the times. It's interesting that he uses that tense. Then the escalation. He says, there was no fight inside that home. John O'Keefe did not enter the home. Forgive the transcript error. Colin Albert, the young man being vilified, was not present when Reed's, again error there, vehicle and John O'Keefe arrived on the street. This is a false narrative. Colin Albert didn't commit the murder. Okay, so we have a transcript error. We have 5 negative statements in rapid succession no fight, did not enter. Okay. So the witness defense, let's carry on with his statement and do forgive some of the transcript errors as they arrive. It will work with what we've got.
Colin Albert didn't commit murder. Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Albert. These people were not part of a conspiracy and certainly did not commit murder or any crime that night. They have been forthcoming with authority, providing statements, and have not engaged in any cover-up. They are not suspects in any crime. They are merely witnesses in the case.
Oh, well, that's nice of him to tell us that.
It should be an outrage to any decent person given statements that they did not see John O'Keefe enter the home at 34 Fairview that night. 0 people have said that they saw him enter the home. 0. No one. Some have, without any evidence, pointed to 18-year-old Colin Albert, a nephew of the homeowner, and accused him of attacking John O'Keefe as he entered the home. But phone evidence shows O'Keefe never entered the home at all. Testimony from witnesses tell us that 18-year-old Colin Albert had left his uncle's home before John O'Keefe and Karen Reed had arrived outside the residence. There was no fight inside that home. John O'Keefe did not enter the home. Colin Albert, the young man being vilified, was not present when Reed's vehicle and John O'Keefe arrived on the street. This is a false narrative. Colin Albert didn't commit murder. Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Albert. These people were not part of a conspiracy and certainly did not commit murder or any crime that night. They have been forthcoming with authority, providing statements, and have not engaged in any cover-up. They are not suspects in any crime. They are merely witnesses in the case. To have them accused of murder is outrageous. To have them harassed and intimidated based on false narratives and accusations is wrong. They are witnesses doing what our justice system asks of them. The autopsy of John O'Keefe was conducted by a forensic pathologist from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. The doctor found that the injuries that left John helpless in the cold were not a result of a fight. She further found that the...
Okay, so he doesn't name the doctor there. Those who know more about the case and know more about what the doctor medical examiner did find, please put it in the comments. But I noticed he doesn't name her, and he's rather vague about that. But let's go into some detail. So the autopsy claim. He says, the autopsy of John O'Keefe was conducted by a forensic pathologist from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. But we have no full social introduction, so we would note that. The doctor found that the injuries that left John helpless in the cold were not a result of a fight. That left John helpless in the cold. I wonder who he's been speaking to. Because we've got language here which is common. Helpless in the cold were not a result of a fight. She further found that the line of abrasions on his arm was consistent with blunt trauma, not an animal attack. Okay, so a forensic pathologist is the words that he uses, not the. Did you notice that? The autopsy of John O'Keefe was conducted by a forensic pathologist. So articles are important to us. Similar to pronouns and tenses are important because articles are instinctive. They come from the unconscious when we choose them at conversational speed. And he says a forensic pathologist, not the. I wonder if he's been shopping around for different forensic pathologists. We've got no social introduction, and we have the article A rather than the. Okay, you might have noticed I slow down when we come to an important bit. This article is important to us. A forensic pathologist. So the doctor is unnamed as well. John O'Keefe becomes John, so we have a change in language, we have an informal shift. Were not a result of a fight and not an animal attack. So we note the not just the article, a forensic pathologist means he's thinking of more than one. If confident in one specific expert would say the doctor such and such. But he also switches from John O'Keefe to informal John precisely when trying to generate sympathy, helpless in the cold. So we have a strategic name change to emphasize the communication. The grand jury shield. Let's have a listen to the next part.
The line of abrasions on his arm was consistent with blunt trauma, not an animal attack. A grand jury of everyday citizens heard the documented evidence and testimony before making a decision. The subject of that murder indictment enjoys the constitutional presumption of innocence. Why should the witnesses who have committed no crime be afforded less by members of the community? They should not be harassed for telling the government what they heard or saw. I'm asking the Canton community and everyone who feels invested in this case to hear all the actual evidence at trial before assigning guilt to people who have done nothing wrong.
Okay, so for the first time he talks about he's angry at others assigning guilt. Let's look at that in detail. So the grand jury shield. He says, a grand jury of everyday citizens heard the documented evidence and testimony before making a decision. The subject of that murder indictment enjoys the constitutional presumption of innocence. Why should the witnesses who have committed no crime be afforded less by members of the community? They should not be harassed for telling the government what they heard or saw. So he's definitely trying to put the suspects in the murder house and categorize them as witnesses, because legally, under his regime, that's what they are currently, witnesses. Everyday citizens is another phrase that he uses. Presumption of innocence for the defendant, but declares witnesses have committed no crime, presuming their innocence as fact, and should not be harassed. He's using the grand jury indictment as proof, but grand juries only hear one side and indict. I don't know if this is true or not, but a lot of the cases presented. But perhaps you can correct that percentage there. It seems very high to me. The vast conspiracy claim. The idea that multiple police departments, EMTs, fire personnel, the medical examiner, and prosecuting agencies are taken by a vast conspiracy should be seen for what it is, completely contrary to the evidence and a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. So he expands the scope. The multiple police departments. This sounds like Brian Albert and his pitch that you can't have a huge conspiracy, whereas the reality is all it takes is those inside the house and some police officers who are friends with them all and are determined to pin it on the girl instead. But Morrissey has taken what appears to be Brian Albert's argument that it's impossible for everyone in the house to conspire not to tell the truth that a murder happened here, and it's impossible to get 2 or 3 police officers to join in with a botched investigation, essentially a non-investigation, and to plant evidence around the murder scene. Brian Albert's argument is that that is impossible and is ridiculous. And it seems that he's convinced, or someone has convinced, Morrissey, because he's using the same language. The projection reveals everything. Look at the final phrase, a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. Now, this is important. Reassign guilt. From where? For guilt to be reassigned, it must first be assigned somewhere. You can't reassign something unless it has been first assigned somewhere. So let's look at what he's actually admitting to us at the unconscious level, which is why we do forensic linguistics and statement analysis, to get to the truth and discover where the deceptions are, or discover where the thinking is. He's admitting to us that guilt has been assigned by him to Karen Read. And critics are trying to move it elsewhere. How dare they? How dare there be a trial? How dare there be a jury? How dare there be a defense? How dare anyone try to reassign the guilt that he, Morrissey, has assigned to Karen Read? It must stop, he tells us. It upsets him. He's angry. He's aggressive. This has to stop, he says, in that arrogant, authoritative, actually weak man way. He is the one who has assigned guilt to Karen Read, and he is the one who is getting desperately angry that others aren't going along with that. Critics are trying to move the assignment of guilt elsewhere instead of recognizing that the trial hasn't even started. The evidence of trying to frame a woman and send her to jail for the rest of her life has not yet been presented. But here's the problem for Morrissey. Karen Read has not been convicted. At this stage, she's only charged. And she has a constitutional presumption of innocence that the DA has removed and has assigned guilt to her, and is angry that others in the trial system, in the legal system, are trying to reassign it somewhere else, perhaps to those in the murder house. Earlier, in his own statement, he said, the subject of that murder indictment enjoys the constitutional presumption of innocence. His own words. And yet he contradicts himself, doesn't he? So if she's presumed innocent, how can guilt be reassigned from her? Unless he himself, Morrissey, unless he's already assigned guilt to her in his mind. In my opinion, this is what he's done. And the word reassign reveals he's treating Karen Read, as they all did, as already guilty, including the lead investigator, who just hours in was looking for nudes on her telephone, texting his childhood friends, and saying essentially that she's going to catch it. Despite his own acknowledgement of the presumption of innocence for Karen Read. And he's upset. He's very upset, isn't he? I mean, look at the way he talked to us. People are questioning his assignment of guilt. So the actual allegation, the Albert family plus the McCabe family plus the connected cops are coordinating stories and attempting to frame an innocent woman. Morrissey's version, multiple police departments, EMTs, fire personnel, medical examiner, prosecuting agencies. This is Brian Albert's argument. Did you see his interview after the trial? They all sat on stools like crows on a wire. And this was his argument, that there's absolutely no way that the people inside the murder house could conspire to say, tell them John didn't come in. But they didn't manage to get the medical examiner, did they? And that's why I think she is not named, and it's not the medical examiner, it's a medical examiner. I think he shopped around for a different medical examiner because she wasn't playing ball. That's my opinion. If anyone's got any evidence to that, I'd love to see it, because it's solely just gut feel on the language. So watch what Morrissey did. He introduced multiple police departments, EMTs, fire personnel, medical examiners, prosecuting agencies, and tried to make it a vast conspiracy. He over-egged it, because a vast conspiracy involving hundreds of people, let's say, and tens of different departments sounds absurd, and it's easy to dismiss. But saying the law enforcement officers inside the murder house convinced everyone there that John didn't come in, that's a lot easier, isn't it? That's a lot easier. Googling Hoslong to die in the cold, moving his body out into the snow, making sure that your mates do the investigation. Let's listen to what else he's got to say.
Certainly, before taking it upon yourself to harass citizens who evidence shows have done nothing in this matter but come forward and bear witness. We try people in the court and not on the internet for a reason. The internet has no rules of evidence. The internet has no punishment for perjury. And the internet does not know all the facts.
Strange how he's the one that before the trial is saying all of this live on television and pumping it out to the internet. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Conspiracy theories are not evidence. The idea that multiple police department, EMTs, fire personnel, the medical examiner, and prosecuting agencies are joined in or taken in by a vast conspiracy should be seen for what it is, completely contrary to the evidence and a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. Michael Proctor, the state police trooper, being accused of planting evidence outside 34 Fairview Road, was never at Fairview Road on the day of the incident. Proctor and his state police partner traveled together the entire day while other officers were processing 34 Fairview. Trooper Proctor was not there and did not plant evidence at 34 Fairview Road.
He didn't investigate.
In addition to having no opportunity to plant the evidence, as has been suggested, Proctor would have no motive to do so. Trooper Proctor had no close personal relationship with any of the parties involved in the investigation. And
okay, no close personal relationship. That's what we've just heard him say. Trooper Proctor had no close personal relationship. This tells me immediately that this character, Morrissey, knows that Proctor knows the people in the murder house. Because he's chosen the word close and he's chosen the word personal. He's inserted those two words deliberately. It means he's aware, and he has attempted, in my opinion, to give the impression to the majority of people that they don't know each other. That's deceptive in my eyes. Let's analyze this in a bit more detail. So the Proctor defense He says, Morrissey says, Michael Proctor, the state police trooper, being accused of planting evidence outside 34 Fairview. This would be the tail light that Higgins smashed in the Sallyport in the police station. And we have Barros saying that the tail light wasn't that broken. He's another police officer. We've done a VEROSCOPE report on Barros if you want to go and check that one out. He is similar. He is the Serpico of this case. He is one of the one police officers willing to tell the truth. Officer Barros, a hero, a genuine officer, a truthful officer. Go and check him out. The video's on the VEROSCOPE channel. He then goes on to say, Proctor and his state police partner travelled together the entire day while other officers were processing 34 Fairview. There was no forensics team inside the house. There was no real investigation, even though there's a dead Boston police officer on the front lawn. He then says Trooper Proctor was not there. That's correct. There was no investigation and did not plant evidence at 34 Fairview Road. Well, you don't know that, Morrissey. You do not know that. And saying this before the trial is highly prejudicial. It's tainting the jury pool. Maybe you're allowed to do that in the US. I don't know. He says, on the day of the incident, so he's limiting the scope, state police partner, doesn't name the other officer, was not there and did not plant. So we have the critical limitation that only covers the day of the incident that he's prepared to commit to. Doesn't include the night. Doesn't include the following days. He then goes on to say, in addition to having no opportunity to plant the evidence, as has been suggested, Proctor would have no motive to do so. Trooper Proctor had no close personal relationship with any of the parties involved in the investigation and had no conflict. So look at this very carefully. The fact that he had to put in close and personal relationship with any of the parties, those additional words, those unnecessary additional words of close and personal, prove to me that Morrissey is fully aware that they do know each other. Do you remember Proctor denied knowing them or having a relationship? And then on the stand, he was absolutely destroyed by Jackson with that. And here we have Morrissey aware that Proctor knows the people in the house and so has to use the words close personal relationship. In other words, yep, okay, I know he knows them, but they're not close personal friends. He's aware, and he's aware it's a problem, and he's chosen the language that, unless you listen closely, would give the majority of the people the idea that they don't know each other, that Proctor doesn't know the people in the murder house. And that's deception. He's accusing others of reassigning guilt that he himself has assigned, and he's angry that you have the audacity not to agree with him. And he's being deceptive, trying to give you the impression that Proctor doesn't know the people in the murder house when they do, and he knows full well that he knows them. So that's why he's added the close and the personal words. Here we have direct, in my opinion, deception from Morrissey, trying to convince the average listener that Proctor didn't know the people in the murder house, and that's wrong. He says no opportunity, no motive, no close personal relationship. The two qualifiers there prove my point. Had no conflict, the opposite is true. Had no reason, the opposite is true. Every suggestion, he says, is a lie. Extreme language, extreme defensive posture, I believe the language is contaminated, possibly from Brian Albert. I wonder how well Morrissey knows the people in the house himself. The qualifier that reveals everything. If Proctor didn't know them, Morrissey would say Proctor didn't know any of them. Proctor had never met the Alberts. Proctor had no connection to the family. Instead, he says, no close personal relationship. What close admits is that there is a relationship, it's just not close. And what personal admits is might be professional, social, or casual, but I don't know, and I'm not willing to commit to it. The qualifiers create escape hatches for him. If they're Facebook friends, not close enough. If they've been at some gatherings together, some weddings, there's some photographs of them in their DJs celebrating together, not close though. They've just been to gatherings together. If they know each other through Boston PD circles, it's not personal though, it's just barbecues. If they've worked together, oh, that's just work, it's not personal. It's not a close personal relationship. They just know each other for 20 years. The precision of the denial reveals consciousness of the problem. He's aware. He is aware. By choosing close personal instead of simply didn't know, Morrissey reveals he knows they do have some connection. And look how well this video has aged. Look what we're discovering about Proctor now. Look what we're discovering about the people inside the murder house now. Look at the FBI investigation, which is still continuing. They have not written to say that the investigation is over, and they do not end the murder investigation of a police officer. This is not going away. No matter how much Morrissey wants it to go away, it is not going away until the crime is solved and justice for John O'Keefe is achieved. He knows it's a problem. Morrissey is managing it with qualifiers. And he needs, if he's not preparing already, he needs to prepare for when the truth emerges, which it is. So the case involves Brian Albert, Chris Albert, Kevin Albert, Proctor. Canton police did the right thing and they recused themselves. Well done, Canton police. There were initially some good officers investigating, but they recused themselves. Morrissey and his qualifiers aren't protecting the truth. They're managing a relationship he knows exists. Let's listen to what else he has to say.
He had no conflict, and he had no reason to step out of this investigation. Every suggestion to the contrary is a lie. This should be seen for...
Have you got that? Any suggestion to the contrary is a lie, according to this buffoon.
What it is, and not used as a pretext to attack and harass others. What is happening to the witnesses, some with no actual involvement in the case, is wrong. It is contrary to the American values of fairness and the constitutional value of a fair trial. It needs to stop now. I am releasing this recorded statement rather than holding a news conference because my remarks need to be so narrowly tailored to the...
Okay, so that brings us to the end of his statement. He says, what is happening to the witnesses, some with no actual involvement in the case, is wrong. It is contrary to the American values of fairness and the constitutional value of a fair trial. It needs to stop now. So he returns to the harassment theme. He introduces American values because at the unconscious level, he knows his case is weak and he knows his case needs the support of additional language like close and personal. So he now introduces American values into the statement, as if now if you don't agree with him, you're against American values and constitutional value. Now, if you don't agree with him, you're against America and against the Constitution. It needs to stop now. More commands from a weak individual, it looks like. The complete threat pattern. Throughout his statement, Morrissey uses authoritarian language to silence dissent, having assigned guilt himself before the trial, and angry that anyone has the audacity to reassign that guilt. He uses moral threats. It should be an outrage to any decent person, he says, meaning you're indecent if you disagree with him. Absolutely disgusting behavior from this official. Absolutely awful, insulting behavior to anyone who has the audacity to disagree with him. Before the trial, we have patriotic threats contrary to American values. You're un-American, according to this man, if you disagree with him or question him. And this is the individual who is, in effect, causing an unfair trial and tainting the jury pool. And yet he has the audacity to accuse you. You're violating the Constitution, he says, unless you agree with him. He has truth threats. Every suggestion to the contrary is a lie. In other words, anyone who disagrees with me is a liar. That's what he's told you. That's what he's told me. He's essentially calling us liars for having the audacity to disagree with him in a murder case. Authority commands. It needs to stop. They should not be harassed. It needs to stop now. It needs to stop in the final sentence. We have 5 commands. This is the language of someone using prosecutorial authority to suppress scrutiny, not someone confident in presenting any evidence. He's not saying, I understand the concerns, let me address the questions, here's the evidence that answers those doubts. In fact, he's saying, stop questioning me. You're indecent if you disagree. You're un-American if you continue. And you're a liar if you suggest otherwise. We have his commands, his moral shaming, his patriotic shaming, and his character attack on anyone who disagrees. This is a district attorney using his position to threaten anyone with a different opinion. He then says, I am releasing this statement, quoted statement, rather than holding a news conference because my remarks need to be so narrowly tailored to the issue at hand while the prosecution is pending in Superior Court. But the message is the same. What is happening to these innocent people, these witnesses, is wrong and it needs to stop. So he introduces the I pronoun into the statement. He says, I am releasing and I am asking. Previously, we had a lack of the I pronoun. Both I statements are about his actions, not his actual beliefs. We also have only one because of the or reason why in the statement, so that's notable. The I pronoun usage is limited to 2. Neither express personal conviction about the evidence, only about administrative actions. So we're picking up some of the unconscious there. In the pattern convergence, following his statement chronologically reveals how these patterns work together. The opening establishes his credentials before presenting information. The evidence presentation structured primarily as negatives. Did you notice that? What didn't happen rather than the positives, what did. We have expert attribution, vague and unnamed throughout. Personal commitment is minimal with the use of I. We have repetition, clusters around did not enter the house. That's very sensitive to him and whoever has been briefing him. 6 times John did not enter the house. Sensitive, isn't it? And we have defensive techniques of scope limitations, straw man expansion, and qualified denials. These observations aren't about individual word choices, they're about how the patterns layer together throughout the statement structure. The statement reads more as a defense of witnesses and investigators than as a presentation of evidence about what happened to John O'Keefe. So what does this all suggest? Morrissey's statement shows it opens with justification rather than information. It presents primarily what didn't happen, 25 negatives versus what did, 5 positives. It avoids personal commitment with the lack of the pronoun I. It repeats denials multiple times with the entering the house being very sensitive, and it uses vague attribution language and unnamed experts throughout. I think he's gone personal, shopping for a new doctor with the use of that article, because the medical examiner wasn't playing ball and wasn't going along with the narrative. In fact, she was doing the opposite. And these patterns are consistent with defensive positioning rather than confident evidence presentation. The structure itself, tracking his words in the order he chose, reveals more about his posture than the actual individual claims. So the patterns that emerged, we had that pronoun pattern, the negative to positive ratio, the repetition clusters, the article usage that we saw, the possible shopping for a new doctor, we have scope limitations, and we have that threat and command pattern. Okay. I think that brings us to the end of today's VEROSCOPE. If you found this useful and you're interested in learning more about statement analysis, do subscribe to the channel. Even better, and it would be doing me a wonderful favor to expand the reach of these analyses, if you hit the notification bell, that really sends a strong signal. Or if you really want to learn how to do this type of analysis and find lies and deception in statements or emails or WhatsApps at work or in your personal life, consider joining as a member the VEROSCOPE channel on YouTube. There are 2 levels. One is buy me a coffee each month, and we put some of the training in that area as a taster. And then there's the higher level of membership, where we're going through the full formal course on forensic linguistic intelligence. Okay, I hope you found that interesting. Please do like, please do comment, please do share, and I look forward to chat to you in the comments.